Okay, the third lecture, Fundamentals of Game Development today, is more or less about the core reason why we are even in this course. So basically, why the game development has its own peculiarities against something like software engineering. What are those things, and in general, how game studios, game startups function? What sort of things they need? How do they actually do their products and exist in real life? Some of this information comes from our novel research into game studios. Some of these things are lifted from as an idea from presentations by people from Rovio, Supercell, other companies which are actually successful businesses, and others are based on other information collected from research. Obviously, because the problem fundamentally is that the game industry 10 years ago wasn't considered much of a industry. It was considered more or less as a hobby. Of course, this impression might be a bit simplistic or stupid, because already 10 years ago, games industry was huge an area of entertainment industries, but still, because the game industry has matured or has gained more people following what's going on there, these things on how software engineering principles and how game industry principles reflect to each other is actually quite a new thing. So let's get started. First of all, like I mentioned, the agenda is games from the viewpoint of software engineering. Of course, this might be a bit one-eyed view into the games industry, considering them as software products, similarly as any other game app, operating system, software application, whatever. But because we are a University of Technology, we have mostly engineers here. Of course, if you are an artist or a musician, the industry itself might present itself a bit differently to you. But if you are developing games and you are an engineer, you probably end up thinking games as software products which aim to entertain you. So that's what the idea, or that's the angle we are using on this presentation. First of all, if we consider what is software development, what aspects are in software development if you want to create a company or want to run an existing company, developing a product or service or whatever system, you more or less end up with these sort of things. You have a development process and phases. Of course, you need to develop design or apply some approach on your development work, simply because it's simply impossible to do anything on commercial grade without actually doing systematically something. You can't stumble upon things anymore. At least it's very, very rare. Of course, you have tools and techniques. How do we do the test automation? What sort of development environments we use? What sort of version control tools we use, so on and so on. What is comparable to each other? You have to test your product to see that it actually fulfills your requirements for the product. Also, perhaps the customers or the company who is paying the development work, publishers' requirements for your work. There's also quality included. So how can you show that your product exceeds or meets the requirement? What sort of things can you measure? What sort of things can you use to establish that, for example, your system works? This is important in something like an aviation industry or space industry, simply because you have to show that your component, your subsystem, doesn't affect or do anything stupid with any of the inputs it can get. Or even if it gets something crazy, it doesn't go berserk and cause, for example, your launch vehicle to explode. This was the Ariane rocket example. On that system, there was a float to integer conversion error, which meant that the system went crazy and it tried to make a U-turn in middle of the atmosphere, which usually isn't a very good thing to do if you are trying to achieve space flight. Anyway, the quality aspects, of course, creativity to a sense. People like using things which look nice. Of course, we don't even have to do gamification or playful design of these sort of things which were mentioned on the last lecture. It's enough if we consider that people like to use things which are clear, which are simplistic to use, but not simple as tools. So the user can do several different things with it, but it's still simple and easy to navigate your way around the software. Also, if you are a company, you of course have additional problems in addition of actually doing the development work or having the tools or the processes or meeting the quality criteria. You have to have the assets, you have to have the human resources, and you need to have the business resources to actually run your company. So basically, you need people who are competent of doing their work or who are competent enough to learn to do their work. Also, as a business, it's important that you actually have money, you have the assets, and you actually are capable of doing the project or the process, completing the process you are actually involved in. If you don't have enough money to pay the salaries, no one's going to do the development work for free. Of course, in this case, the other developers might be as a partial owners of your new startup company and these sort of activities, but still, you need some sort of funding or way to fund your production work. And finally, the asset acquirement means that if you are developing something, you probably won't develop everything from scratch. I know that if you are, for example, making a web store, it's completely normal to buy yourself a framework which handles all the credit card transactions and that sort of stuff, the internal catalog, databases, these sort of things, so that you don't actually have to develop them yourself. You acquire the components or the assets and then just integrate them to each other so that they work nicely. And of course, why am I talking about this thing? Why am I starting with this picture? It's more or less because it's exactly the same as with the game development. Only thing that needs to change on this picture is the topic. And we have something that defines all the different aspects of game software development. There's no difference here. You need money, you need your tools, you need your development work, you need someone to do the programming work, you need your assets, whether it's the credit card transactions or micropayments or 3D models or textures or whatever, you still need them so that you can develop something. Of course, there's some differences here. For example, these standardizations, for example, with quality aspects or development phases for very small companies, which, by the way, that ISO IEC 29110 defines, or test process activities, which the other ISO 29119 defines. They obviously aren't that concerned on the games industry, and the vice versa. Games industry isn't really that into international standardization on these software aspects, but still all of these things need to exist when you are developing games. So that's where we actually, this is where we start. So the XAMPP logo here is still existing because this project and this presentation was part of a project which was done in cooperation with what is now LUT and XAMPP, the Southeastern Finland University of Applied Sciences. Of course, this presentation was done by me, so don't get fooled by this logo here. This is actually my presentation. I'm not just borrowing this from somebody else. So, let's make money. That's, I guess is one of the things with what the game developers want. So I said on the first thing on this lecture that 10 years ago, the games industry was considered sort of a hobby, which some software developers or competent programmers do on their free time or when they are unable to find actual real job to pay their bills. Of course, that sentiment is stupid because already in 2008, the games industry was one larger industry than the music industry. And it was rapidly gaining on the movies, which it actually overtook later in 2016. Here somewhere, if we would continue this graph to the right, we would see that the games industry and movie industry are almost or exactly the same. And in 2016, 2017, the games industry actually became the largest entertainment industry in the world. So yeah, there is money in it. That's why it's such a popular thing to do nowadays. If we consider that you want to start a band or become a movie star or develop a game, probably the best way to make money is out of making your own game studio. Because the movie stars, the movie industry, it's something like 100 billion US dollars. It's not something that you can throw away, but still the games industry is actually somewhat larger, something like 140, if I remember correctly. So it's a definitely larger industry. And the music industry is going downwards the whole time. So basically the huge rap stars, R&B stars, rock stars, whatever, they are in sort of a dying industry in a sense that they actually aren't that well funded as an area. People are not very interested in, not as interested in music as in movies and games. And if we consider this against the software industry in 2007, here, when the games were something like 40 billion and the movies were about 80 billion US dollars, the software industry, this meaning that the software industry which does applications and operating systems, not accounting for something like auto industry or aviation where the software plays a huge part but the product itself actually isn't software, it's something else. The software industry was 300 billion in US dollars. So of course what it means is that it's huge, much larger than these entertainment areas combined. And of course, even today, considering that the games would be something like 140, and we have to also take into account that the software industry has also grown in the last 10 years. So of course, we are talking about the subset of software industry, the games industry. But still, it's not a small blip on the radar or some meaningless small little hobby thing. It is a subset, yes, but it's very large subset of software industry if we are considering the money-making opportunities or how much in sales goes through the software and the games industry. So these demographics aren't especially new anymore. It just illustrates the idea that games make money because they reach almost every area of people who are interested in buying something. It also means that because the games are so varying and different, offer different types of experiences and different things to do, you don't have to, for example, always spend 2 hours sitting in one place to play a game like watching a movie. So this actually means that the games as an industry has influence on many different types of customers. Therefore, the age of players is somewhere about around 37 years old people. This is also, not surprisingly, this is also fairly close to the average age of people in the planet in general, at least on the industrial, on the Europe and Northern America and so on. So, and also 42% of the players or gamers are female. So it's no longer, or it has never been, a high school boy thing to play in a basement. It simply isn't. This number actually has gone up a bit. It's almost 50% by the latest information, meaning that there's actually no clear difference anymore between the different genders of players, meaning that if you make a game and if you want to make a successful game, it might have and will probably have players from all genders. Also, for 33% of gamers, the play games are their favorite hobby, meaning that if they can only select one thing to do for the rest of their lives, they would keep video games or mobile games or games in general as their favorite hobby. This, of course, means that that basically you can't tell who is a user or who consumes games, entertainment products, and who don't. And there's actually fairly innovative things here. For example, one thing that was quite a surprise for many people when the games industry in mobile games especially became a huge thing was that the female aged 24 to 36 were a huge consumer market, which decided to make the King Games one of the largest mobile game companies in the world with their Candy Crush saga and these sort of things. Why? Simply because the Candy Crush and similar games were short enough, simple enough, and easy enough to play that you can play the game while you are home watching the children and doing chores and homework and that sort of things. It offers almost instant gratification because the game sessions are designed to take like 2 minutes and you can play the game without actually having to concentrate. For example, reserving a TV set and the game controller and these sort of things for your game session. So of course it became a huge hit. And it also illustrates the fact that since almost half of the gamers are female, if you make something that attracts their money, then you are making a good money. You don't have to worry about the Medal of Honor and Call of Duty and these sort of Fortnite people on all your game designs. If you know something that attracts to your customer type, then you probably can live off your customer type, whoever it is, and whatever the customer segment is that you want to focus your products on. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, and this is also a slide I showed on the first lecture, the game development and software development, of course, share common features. The design work isn't going anywhere. Programming tasks aren't going anywhere. Objectives, you have to release your stuff in time, in budget, with the intended features and acceptable quality, of course, isn't going anywhere. You need to eventually release something. The Apogee Games with the Duke Nukem Forever tried an approach where they never released their game. Well, they went bankrupt. In budget, they also managed to spend huge amount of money on their product. Well, it didn't work that well. And of course, if you run out of money with a product you don't really have, then you are not making money back, which is a sort of a problem. You go bankrupt. Also, with the intended features and with an acceptable quality. What are the intended features? Of course, varies between what your aim is. Do you just want to introduce your core game and then do additions for it, or if you are just making a one product, kicking it out of the door, and then forgetting that it ever existed? But anyway, Whether your product is shovelware or actual real product, it still needs to have the intended features so that it attracts people. And finally, you have to do something with acceptable quality. And for example, games which crash your mobile phone or lock it out or cause problems with the platform are very frowned upon because people don't really like rebooting their mobile phones or game consoles and that sort of stuff. But still, if we consider the games as themselves, like I mentioned earlier, the games also have the added requirement that they need to be fun. Because the games don't offer really anything. Well, the fun is a bad word. It's basically they give the expected user experience because the games don't have anything else. They are products of entertainment. If you are listening to shitty music, you turn it off. If you are watching a shitty movie, you just go away from the theater or watch something else from Netflix. And if you are playing a shitty game or something that isn't really exciting or which you consider boring, then you just drop playing it. You might try it once and then never come back. You might download it, try out the tutorial level, decide that this isn't for me, and then uninstall it or leave it on your mobile phone because you don't really need to uninstall the application just right now, and you consider that you might do something, but you actually really never are coming back. This is something that actually really is well illustrated when we consider how the free-to-play models work. But we'll get back to that later. Anyway, considering that all the software requirements that you have to meet, you still also have to make something that attracts and interests your customers. If it's a horror game, like I mentioned before, it needs to be something that's scary. If it's something small, a micromanagement game like making a factory or something like that, then you have to have possibility to do different types of transport belts and bots and stuff like that, so that the game actually stays interesting as a logical challenge of optimizing the machine chain. Of course, some people might find this sort of games completely horrible. They are not actually not that fun. You are just running a huge machine as efficiently as you can. But for some people, it might be a really funny thing to do. So, going into the actual development work, of course, we might have a killer idea. Most of us probably have. It's funny since in several movies and TV shows, there's always the fight over who owns the idea. That do not steal my idea. That the huge problem becomes if someone sees the design portfolio of a, for example, game developer. There was some crime serial series, I don't remember which one it was, but still, there was a huge thing that the guy was actually killed because they wanted to see that game designers design portfolio or that designers new drafts for stuff like that. Well, first of all, the ideas aren't worth anything. Every one of us can come up with several ideas, but the fact that you have to refine that idea into a product and then actually make it, test it that it works as a customer product, as that your idea works in the mobile platform, in the platform you are intending it to be released. These are the things that cost money and you can shortcut them very well. If you steal some Sid Meier's or some other guy's newest design paper or design draft, you probably get something that's unique or, well, by someone who's famous for making a good games. But still, that design might be a horrible, horrible mess simply because it wasn't refined and that particular idea didn't work. But okay, let's focus on the actual part that follows the design. So we have to develop the product. From software engineering, we of course know that there's huge amount of different ways of developing software. The waterfall and iterative waterfall are, of course, the classic model, which no one really uses or used, but still it's a sort of a classic in the sense that it offers all the basic stuff. Also, there's more advanced models, but for the game development companies, the problem also is that the game studios aren't that large organizations to begin with. There's almost always less than 20, probably less than 15 people in a game studio, but the game publishing company, of course, is a completely different thing. Ubisoft games are developed by hundreds of people, but if we consider the normal game studio, which you might find from here Lappeenranta, or most companies in Helsinki, for example, they are small companies, so they should use a development model which is geared towards small or very small companies. Of course, we also in software engineering have those, Scrum model, well, the continuous development models, well, it's more of an ideology than process model. But for example, here is the ISO IEC 29110 model for very small enterprise development, meaning that basically this standardization here defines the smallest possible process model, which includes all the necessary steps for a small company of a couple of people working with the principles of real software development, how enterprises do software development. So there's a planning phase, there's a plan execution phase, there's assessment and control, and there's a project closure. There's implementation, initiation, requirements analysis, component identification, construction, meaning, of course, development and quality assurance work. Then there's a further integrations and testing, and then there's a software delivery. Fairly simple things, really. So, do these models actually work in game studios or game development? Well, this is the problem. They don't. Game products or games as software may have all the same components that the software products do, but because the design philosophy behind them is quite different, they are products of entertainment or things of entertainment, they have different sets of priorities, so they need to focus on different things. For example, this is the same model that was shown on the last slide. It's revised to cater into the needs of the actual game development companies, or revised based on how game development companies actually work. There's a couple of small differences here. For example, on the project management level here, we have revisions, plan execution and revisions, and the project management ping pongs between the plan execution and assessment. Simply because, like I said, we can't, or we probably won't ever make the first design as interesting or as marketable or as usable as we need to when we are trying to find our customer segment. So we need to be prepared to change things. Even at the last stages, we need to be able to make revisions if we find something that irritates our customer or target audience, or if we find something that works better. Simply because we want to make a product which is as good as we can make, or as interesting or as fun as we can make for our target audience. So even just before the acceptance tests for delivery, meaning that the product design is completed only at the stage when we send something for the publisher or actually publish something. We have to be prepared to make changes throughout the project, simply because we can't have just a list of technical things that we need to implement. This is also illustrated here on the lower part. We start with an initial requirement analysis and design. This is something that we think that will work. And this cycle here keeps refining that idea with the component identification, development, well, construction work, integration testing work, requirements analysis and design. And as long as we need find reasons or things that we need to refine, whether it's add content or whatever, we are running on this cycle. And like one example, I don't remember if I told it on this first lecture or not. Actually, one game product underwent major revision on the last stages of development simply because they made an accidental bug on the way how their character moves throughout the puzzle world or the platform world. And the test users found it much more interesting than the original product. So of course, why release something that's worse than things we already have? So they had to redesign their game using that unintended feature as one of their main features, simply because that was something that they found that their customer segment found much funnier and much more interesting. So of course, they have to make that as a part of the game. Anyway, the problem is still that the software development process models and game development process models start from different are focused on different perspectives and don't necessarily emphasize the same things. If we consider how the games are actually made, these are just illustrations on a couple of modes how real life game studios work. These both iterations, the pipeline and iteration, actually have real name behind them. These are from a couple of real live game studios, which of course I can't name because it was given as a confidential information, so I can tell you which one is which and which company uses which. But the idea here is that basically there's two modes of doing the work. If you have the financial backing or if you don't have financial backing, or if you have a publisher or don't. If you have a publisher, you brainstorm or create a game idea and make a prototype, proof of concept work, which you sell to the publisher, to the company who funds your work or tells that, okay, if you make it like this, then we will take it as a part of our catalog. That means that you more or less just commit to the development work when you have sold your product and then make sure that it actually is what you sold. And when the publisher says that, okay, this has enough content, this is now ready, it goes to maintenance, it gets updates, bug fixes, additional content, and so on and so on. The important part to understand here is that you still do the refinement cycle. It's here, but it's very small because you already sold your proof of concept here and the financial commitment happened here. So it doesn't ever jump from this part to this part, from the prototype to development, unless you have the funding to ensure that it actually gets made and it actually gets launched and so on. Okay, so if you don't have a publisher, or if you are a startup studio making something that you want to put out anyway, even no matter what the other companies say, or if you find a publisher or not, then you are using this iteration model. This is more or less a huge iteration cycle. You start with a game idea. Similarly as here, you have a game idea. You may have some sort of prototype, but you make a rough plan on how we can make this true, develop the first version, and then try to collect feedback from any sources. It may be parents, friends, open displays, harassing people on some hypermarket parking lot, whatever. Anyway, you collect feedback from companies who might publish it, or your friendly competition who might actually say what's wrong with your game, or how they would do it differently, and these sort of things. And you decide on what you want to do, make a rough plan out of it, and keep refining your product. At some point, you will run out of money, or out of time, or out of patience, or your product actually ends up being good enough so that you might want to publish it. So you decide that, okay, we don't make new changes anymore, so you put it out. So you publish it. What if you have managed to secure a publisher or marketing company or something like that, then you drop it there. If you don't have, then you just put it out on App Store or Google Play or these sort of places and start your marketing campaign and hope for the best. That's how it works. These are the two models which more or less summarize the ways of how game development studios work. It's a sort of Scrum model, if you consider it, but it's either the cycle, including that you are just trying to progress towards something tangible, whereas on this other model, you have already sold your idea, you just need to make it as a full, complete product. And of course, this also has some limitations on what works in general and what doesn't. Okay, so if we want to test our product, there's a couple of things that we need to understand. Of course, games have to focus on different things. If we want to test something, we test the user experience. This means that we test the user interface, we test the content, we test the rules, we test the things that actually are, for things like the internal logic of the game. We might not necessarily be very interested in things like technical aspects, how well this is supported by the older legacy devices, or these sort of aspects, or how well optimized this code is. Of course, while some companies might do that because they want their product to work on all the currently supported versions of Android phones, for example. But some companies don't spend money on backward support or ensuring that it works on all the different devices that the player might use. Also, you have to test the content. Nothing is as annoying or stupid than having a always win strategy in your game. No matter what the other player does or the artificial intelligence does or what the situation is, you have always this one strategy or one way of playing which always wins. This is actually very difficult to find or balancing the game in general, because if you are a huge hit, your user group or your users will include people who are much better in mathematics than you are, or in optimization problems than you are, simply because the statistics say that there will be someone who is very good at these things. So huge amount of time is actually dedicated on content testing and abuse testing and these sort of things. And of course, if the smaller game studios want to include things like text chat on their game, they are doomed, because they simply don't have money to take all of the dick pics and stuff like that out from their products. So they need to circumvent this somehow. For example, by using a chat where you can send a list of pre-selected symbols or things meaning something to other users from the list that they have approved or they have designed. It's something to do with the games, or that I'm happy, or something like that. But these problems and these features are part of the content testing and abuse testing and that sort of stuff, which might not be that common in serious applications. Well, of course, some people probably send dick pictures to tax office with their internet tax revenue forms, but they probably don't get that much attention. But on games, places where you have to, for example, see that the content is always something that's safe for, let's say, 12-year-olds or stuff like that. It's a much different thing. And finally, these are the things that more or less summarize everything that the testing and quality assurance does. So 4 things that they are focusing on is the user testing, testing with users. Usability testing, how easy to use is this? Can we streamline or improve the user interface somehow? Explorative testing, so can we find a way to abuse or break this game or product in some innovative way? Or unit testing. They do the normal unit testing things with the software applications. They are more or less easy smoke tests and usually done with the development tools or the development engine they are using. But still, unit testing is more or less the one thing that the testing activities share in common with the software engineering work. And finally, the objectives of testing work. Technically, it means that there's good enough is enough. If it works, if it launches, if it doesn't crash, if it stays more or less intact and it doesn't corrupt the system or its own files or the save states, then it's good enough. Mechanically, make sure that there is no way to always win, because that's just boring, it ruins the experience. And finally, on the user experience, is this actually what we want? Is this something that we want from this product? Is this something that our target audience or the audience who found this product to be interesting wants from this product? Is this worth launching? And is this something that doesn't ruin our reputation? You can more or less sell one item to everyone in the world once. But if it's a complete failure, or if it's sold on promises which are never fulfilled, selling the second product will be the problematic thing. Or in free-to-play models, getting people to try out your software or your game is relatively easy. You just keep marketing until you have enough player pool to so that you have enough people who might pay for the product. But still, if you have a crappy product which isn't very interesting, you don't make anything. You don't just make money out of it because people aren't spending money on it. And that's why the user experience is king. Also on testing work. Well, on software tools, it's not very, there's not much to know about these things. There's expectations and needs. Earlier, the problem was that there's simply not good enough software development tools for game development. So game developers had to create their own systems of how to make things. Of course, this isn't anymore true. There's a number of game engines, game frameworks, game base systems, libraries, which more or less form the backbone of almost every product. Physics 2D library, for example, was heavily applied by Rovio until they developed their own physics library. Rovio also switched from their own system to Unity engine at one point. And in general, the Unity engine, which we also use on this course, is one of the more popular ones, although it's obviously not one of the most optimized and easiest to use ones, but still it's probably one of the things that's most extendable systems, so that's also why it's used by many companies. But the one actually interesting thing is that the only thing that the game studios are really adamant on is that it has to provide easy prototyping ability. You have to have tools which allow you to just more or less drag and drop, make a couple of changes here and there to test out some idea. Because some ideas work on paper, but are absolutely horrible in the actual application, whereas on other cases, some ideas which sound very stupid on paper are actually very fun when you put it on application. And because you can't always tell which one this is, you have to have easy prototyping tools. That's more or less the lifeline of game developing studio. You need to be able to rapidly test out different ideas or test out ideas with a couple of days of development work. because after that you more or less see if it's going to ever work or not. If it doesn't seem a good idea after a couple of days of development, you scrap it and try something else. It's important to understand, for example, that with Rovio, which is of course a bit of an old news now. They haven't had a huge hit in something like 5 years now, but still, the Angry Birds, which became the huge hit, which everyone, even in Mars, knows about, probably in the next solar system also. It's 53rd product of the company. And that's how many things they did before they found the golden egg laying goose. And they had all 50 products before that. They were also something that they consider publishing worthy. But of course, it also means that they have had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas which didn't work, which were tested out and then scrapped. Okay, going into the new parts. So business logistics. This lecture is about if you would like to start a game studio, what sort of things you have to expect. So there's a couple of models of selling things in games industry. There's the traditional way, which is somewhat going away, but still exists if you are playing with game consoles and stuff like that. So it means that you have a publisher, you make a disc, put it on sales, and it's sold to you, for example, on Prisma there near the airport, and then you can take it home, put it on your console. Well, of course, wait for 3 fucking hours because it needs to update every single thing afterwards. But still, that's the one way of playing games. And that's one thing which was the traditional way of playing. So the developer here sends its product to publisher, who sells its product to distributor, who sells its product to retailer, who then sells it to consumer. And after this chain of things, the developer gets 10% of money. Well, not much, but if you have a huge hit, it's still something. But most of the money is somewhere else besides the game studio. So, of course, when the technology made it possible to digitally distribute things, it opened up the world for more small game studios, simply because it was more profitable, it was direct market, and of course, you were no longer in the mercy of a couple of larger game publishing houses, which existed with a worldwide audience. For example, in Northern Europe, Finland, Sweden, Norway, there was exactly one game publishing company in southern Sweden. And of course, that's not very much, considering that the Nordic countries have become the sort of a prime example of mobile game applications. So, digital distribution way. It doesn't matter if you are distributing things via Microsoft Store or whatever the Sony PlayStation uses, or App Store, or Google Play, because they all have something like 30% cut. You upload your stuff there, sell it there, and you keep 70%, and the retailer keeps 30%. Of course, this isn't always this is the positive case of the situation. Of course, you probably don't have money to develop your game because simply you just don't have enough resources. So you need to have a publishing house or marketing company to make marketing buzz for you, or create visibility for you, or just pay your rent for the time you are developing things. So usually there's also one other company which takes 50% of the money which the developer might get. But still, 35% is much more than 10%. So that's why digital distribution became a thing. But of course, it doesn't end here. We also all know that these are more or less the old models. So what about free-to-play model? The model which is currently a thing on the mobile game application. First of all, these numbers are all from real game studios. I can find, or I could find you the CEO to say that these numbers are in fact totally accurate. But I can do. I won't do it now. You just have to trust me on this one. So make a game with a development team which is able to create game products, okay, which become hit in a couple of countries and generate huge amounts of money. If you don't put any money on the marketing or rely on word of mouth marketing or just positive social media events and stuff like that, put your game on sale or put your game available and then expect someone to pay for in-app purchases, you get 74 euros. The game development takes 6 months. So, and it was 4 people for 6 months, and they made as much as 74 euros on the first year with their product. So it didn't work. Then the next product was made by first approaching with the prototype and finding a publishing company to work with. They share the profits with the company, and the company ensures that they get visibility and marketing and all the other things which are needed. So they made, on the first 3 months, they made 25,000 euros. Not exactly money to use as a down payment for your new Ferrari, but still it's money which you can live on. And actually this product also became a sort of a hit on Asian countries, so it's the total profit for now for the entire family of games is probably somewhere about between 500,000 and 1 million, but still we aren't talking about Lord of the Rings money here, but it's still something that actually generates you money. In general, if you are on the top 25 list of your game category or your product category, for example, in App Store or in Google Play, so that it's on the front page when you are looking for new puzzle games or stuff like that, it generates you something like 5,000 euros per day. As long as you stay there, it's additional 5,000 euros per day for sales. So it's not much, but it's still something. So, and if the mobile games take 3 to 6 months to make and 90% of the sales are within the first month after your release, you more or less know if you are going to be making 74 euros or 25,000 plus, because after 5 weeks, you have had majority of your sales. You can expect something from sales spikes. If you put your game on sale, it's of course going to make a small spike, but it's still you make less money out of it. And of course, you need to understand that you are working on international business. Everyone is your competition. So you can't rely on just knowing that my product is so good that it will blow everyone's expectations. Well, there's 7 billion people here. How can you know that there isn't someone in China or USA or India or another country making the exact same type of thing? So you have to do some marketing, especially when we go to free-to-play models, because that changes more or less everything on how you should approach these things. If we go to free-to-play model, we are dealing with percentages. Marketing for free-to-play model is basically purchasing users. For each euro you spend, how many new users do you get? This is the only thing that matters for free-to-play marketing. If I put 100 euros on this marketing avenue or advertisement system, how many new users or downloads do I get? And of course, in this you have to understand that new users doesn't necessarily mean that they will pay you anything. It just means that you get people to download your product and start your game at least once. Out of these people, up to 14% might actually play your game more than once. The others simply try it out, say that, okay, I don't care, whatever. Out of those people who actually keep playing your game, 95% of people never pay for anything. They just like the game enough to play it, but don't like it enough to pay anything for it, or they don't find it so interesting that they want to use the shortcuts or power-ups or whatever you have. 4% of players out of those who play your game might buy something once or twice by accident or whatever. They might buy that one small flask of crystals or whatever because they just want to use shortcut once, or they feel obliged to donate something for the company but aren't really interested in keeping you afloat. And the 1% of players who are the whales keep you provided with a stream of constant income. And these might actually be even thousands of dollars per user. I don't think that you actually might even know this, or well, don't know it because it was a couple of years ago. But there was a guy in Singapore who wanted to be, or Hong Kong, whatever, that's irrelevant, who wanted to become the global #1 on Clash of Clans. So normal people would just play the game and enjoy it, but because this person was adamant that he needs to become the #1 in the world, because he and other investment bankers he was working with were all playing that game, he decided to hire 3 assistants whose job was to keep the game online throughout the day, 24/7, simply because you can't be attacked and your score can't be reduced if you are online. So he hired people to play that game for him. He also spent a couple of thousands of dollars per day in the game to buy everything instantly, always, immediately, so that he can attack places and make sort of a spike on his score, so that he can become the #1 in the world. What did he get by achieving that? Was that he on the game, if you looked at the leaderboards and the global was the default one, his user DAC was there as a #1. He didn't get anything else, but he hired 3 people and spent thousands of dollars of money just to play the game. And of course, Supercell wasn't really complaining about this because they found a whale who probably paid everyone's salaries that month. So that's how it happens. Also, because there's enough competition, one CEO said that finding a new game, free-to-play game from market is like going to a store where there's only milk cartons sold. But there's no label or anything in the milk carton. You just pick one, try it out. If it tastes nice, you keep buying that carton from that position. So it means that also, since you don't want to run out of content for the game, you don't want to lose the whale you attract to your product, you actually make money from maintenance work, continuous development of new content, and this sort of live ops approach into development. Which means that your core product is launched with number of features, but it's not complete game. You add things, you add things, you add things. Every time your top players are about to reach the peak, unlock everything, play all the levels through, so on and so on, you add more content to keep the game alive. That's what you actually have to do if you are doing the free-to-play approach. And actually this one illustrates the amount of users. Keep in mind that you pay money in marketing to achieve even one of these things. So the blue ones are users here who download your game, try it once, and never play it again. The green ones are the people who play your game but never pay for anything. The yellow ones are the people who buy something once, and the red one here is the one person who actually pays everything, the whales. And this is not the people who you attract with your marketing. This is the people who you actually got to download the game and try it at least once. There's also the people who saw the advertisement but did not click it, or did not install your game, or installed and never bothered to try it out. So basically, you are paying money to find these people. And why here's 200 of these things here is that actually it's well, because it's less than 1% of users who actually paid for something. We wouldn't have one full user unless we used 200 people as our test set. So it looks a bit bleak, but these guys here, or this user group here, is so good for your product that even a couple of hundred of those can keep your game studio afloat. And these ones perhaps sometimes buy something, but it's not guaranteed to ever happen. But still, you are paying money to find that one person. But of course, that's why I said that in free-to-play games, you are paying money to gain visibility. And if you gain visibility, you will start to gain users. That's how everything works. So, this was lifted from presentation by Rovio. It was heavily agreed by people from Supercell, so it has to be true. So if you need to have the game business, the current mobile game business in 5 bullet points, these are them. Follow these and you aren't making an ass out of yourself. This doesn't guarantee that you succeed, but this guarantee that you at least tried something that's fairly competent thing to try out. So you need to go mobile business, mobile platform. You need to make your product free to play. You need to make your money from in-app purchases, from whales, which you try to attract, these people who pay for everything, and you approach the production with live ops approach. You add new things, you have seasonal themes, you try to show that you are actually maintaining your game, and you try to constantly make it more interesting or usable for the users. So, there's also the part of visibility, which I want to address here with a couple of slides. So, if you are interested in creating a game studio, and from this course or set of courses, there actually have been a couple of game studios which were found. But when you are making your first product, you are the CEO of your very own game studio, you have to understand that these all apply to your company. You are nobody. Nobody cares what you are doing. No one will try out your new idea or game or app simply because they are interested in it. There's so many of these companies that no one cares. No one will do something out of the goodness of their heart. You have to actually elbow your way in. No one will pay money for the app you are making because the publishing companies don't give a damn about game studios which have not published anything. After you have published successfully something, then you are a thing, because then you are making games and not just having an expensive hobby. And this also means the investments. No one will invest in your company unless you make your first product. So that's why you need to have your product portfolio up immediately. It's even better if you start your game studio with one product ready to launch, because no one is interested in a game studio which hasn't historically published anything. And finally, no one knows that you exist. Using the using the social media approach doesn't work. You can't catch enough people. Yes, you have a question.
Yeah, how do you promote your game when you don't exist?
Well,
like when you publish your first game, how
well,
do you promote it?
Well, the first approach, of course, is that you need to find someone to cooperate with. You need to try to find someone who is willing to listen to your talk. You have to go with an almost complete prototype and then someone might actually help you, or you try to run up on sleeves of some other company which you hopefully have some connections to, or you try to find someone from publishing company who is looking to their portfolio something that's similar that you are doing, or you do outsourcing work for some other game studio to gain money to actually buy your visibility for your first product. Yeah, there's no shortcuts here. So that's what this means, that you have to do the legwork, you have to do the business work. You can't just cram out something and wait for the Electronic Arts to contact you. That simply doesn't happen. So that's why these are the things that will happen, and you are running from meeting to meeting and contact to contact to try to make one of these things not true. This also emphasizes the fact that your first product needs to launch earlier than later, because you need to have a portfolio of products so that you are considered competent company. Game studio. So that's the starting point. So it's not exactly a very nice thing. Free-to-play model where everyone leeches off your work, play it for free, not pay you for anything, and no one gives a damn about your product. Not exactly very interesting, but still, well, not very promising, but still, this is the starting point that everyone has to work with. The other thing is, of course, the approach on how to generate visibility. This is important, for example, exactly for us engineers, because how to gain visibility, how to become a memorable company. I'm using my own book here as an example, because this is something that I was taught by one person doing advertisements. So this is an advertisement created by engineer. I know it because I created it myself. It's exactly on the point. It shows the product here. It tells what it is and tells something about what the content is. Of course, no one is interested in on this one. If you see this on a billboard somewhere, or it's a poster or something like that, you really don't care. Put it this way, and this actually starts to be interesting. Of course, this doesn't tell anything about the product, but you need to have simple visual cue, simple marketing slogan, for example, like brainfuck on this case, and you have to have something that then guides for people interested in this towards the product, which was the earlier part, the book itself. But it also means not that I'm terrible at making advertisements, but it also in general means that the advertisements and marketing and these sort of things are an area where you should rely on professional help or listen to people who actually do that, have the connections. Similarly, as I said earlier, that it will be a cold day in some imaginary place when the engineer is allowed to draw in the commercial grade game product before the graphical artist. Also, same thing happens here. You need to have people who are actually capable of doing the visual work, because this one is it's told to me that this one is much more interesting than the previous thing, although this one doesn't actually even tell what the product is. So, getting back to the actual talk about how game development and software development are connected. So, of course, the innovation and these sort of things, it's a bit of an marketing thing, really, for the games development. So they say that it's a sort of creative chaos, or it's a very innovative industry. But when you go to see what sort of products they launch, it's dominant systems. You can't really do anything interesting with the hardware. And it's also sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel. So of course, is it really innovative? Is it really creative industry? Well, it is and it isn't. Of course, if you find a product which sells well, you keep making sequels to that until it does no longer sell. But the themes and trends keep changing, so there's always a possibility to hit gold mine with new products and new test things. So this also means that you can't be too derivative on your products, but also the themes and trends might go somewhere completely unexpected. I've been saying this as an example for years, but the zombies and that sort of stuff is finally dying out. But for example, the next big thing might be dinosaur riders or whatever, cowboys and dinosaurs, that sort of thing. So basically, this also means that you need to aim for the next big thing. If you start making a product which is now interesting for the current markets, when it hits shelves or the app download in app stores in 6 months, it's outdated, it's old news, it's terrible, it's already seen, it's already done, and no one wants it. So that's why you also always have to innovate on something a bit different, something new, something that might guess right the trend or theme changes, what actually sells tomorrow, not what sells today. And actually, if we look into this pie chart here, like I mentioned earlier, that if you find your target audience, you will never go hungry again. Because, of course, these are the different genres of game development. There's action games, sports games, first-person shooter games, family entertainment, adventure, racing, so on and so on. And the final sliver here, which you probably even can't see, because most of you aren't sitting in the wrong row, is arcade games. But still, arcade games are 150 million US dollars market. Oh, well, they were in 2013. So which means that even this small sliver here can probably keep 2 or 3 large game studios in business without any problems. So it also means that whatever your fancy is, if you make a good design and good products based on it, you will probably find your audience, provided that you have enough marketing power or you find the right channels which reaches your audience, which reaches large enough portion of your audience. Finally, the game design itself, of course, well, there's really no magic wand use on that. So games deliver experiences. Playability has to be good enough, and the game development itself by the game developers, they say that it's creative work with software engineering stuff in it. So the game developers find that they are in a creative business or creative industry, which just has a number of software engineering things in it, which in itself is a good thing. But if we actually ask the game developers, do they consider the games art, or do they consider games in general as art, for example? The games are not art, really. Some games may have artistic assets to them or artistic merits to them, but games in general are designed with profit in mind, so they are not art in art's sake. They are products which include artistic assets. Of course, the artistic merits and creativity are well-received attributes. Of course, everyone likes that their games are considered artistic and creative, but still, it's not exactly what the game developers aim for, because they are in business. They are running a company, they try to stay afloat, they want to pay their bills. So if we ask the company if they want to make a product which everyone remembers but wasn't very wasn't commercially very successful, or if they want to make commercially successful product, which no one remembers after 5 years, basically every game designer or game studio owner said that they want to make a profitable game. They like the artistic game. It's something that they always also want to do. But if they have to select between making an art or making money, they want to make money. That's the thing they want to do. And most of them also use the escape clause that they want to first make money, huge amounts of money, and then they will try out some new different things. But of course, who cares what the people think after they have won the lottery? They already have the money, so they can do whatever they want to do. So, but also in general in game design, if you ask companies how they do that, well, it's brainstorming, it's a visions. I strong feeling that this will work. They might have internal pitching contests. They might do just prototyping. And one company actually used pens and paper and toy soldiers and these sort of things to design their levels and design their game before they committed to actually making programming work. But almost always, the design is first made with prototype, and then it involves marketing, it involves testing. What is fun? Is this game fun? Is this the exact user experience we want? The first design, the technical design, the first initial rough design is something that you can do on your own desk, on the lead designer's mind, but then you have to involve marketing and testing to see if this might actually work on someone else, on somewhere else than in the mind of the game designer. Okay, so coming to the last part. So you want to make a startup company and you need a startup team. So what sort of things you need to do? Well, considering the previous slide from Hovio, which said mobile platform and live ops development and so on, this is about the personnel resources. So of course we need to start by mobile games for smartphones or tablets, because this is the area where we can do something small but still possibly profitable. It includes 2 to 4 people. They are owners, they work without salary. So if you start a company, you can expect after maybe a couple of years to be able to pay yourself salary or something from that job. So you need to also somehow find funds to live during that time. So basically, there's usually one designer, one programmer, and one artist. It means that there's one person who is so good at doing programming work that he or she, the developer, can do whatever needs to be done on that platform, and also an artist who is good enough to create commercial art or commercial graphics on whatever aspect needs to be done, and designer who understands how games work, how games are designed, what sort of things are interesting to different types of people, and what sort of products already exist. In practice, everybody does everything, but everyone has one of few particular specialities. And also, you ask what's the fourth person. If one is designer, one is programmer, and one is artist, the fourth one is the person who is capable of running the company, understands something about contracts, understands something about publishing work, marketing work, is able to actually work with the bigger players or the bigger companies to come up with opportunities and possibilities for the team. So your first problem, like mentioned earlier, is that you need to have simple game design to get something published. Because as long as you haven't published anything, the big players are not interested in your existence. If you have something in your portfolio, congratulations, now you are a game studio, so now you can actually start talking with the actual game publishing companies. And of course, the biggest expenses for your company are marketing, perhaps tools if you are using something fancy. And the sound effects, secondary 3D models, and music. You can't do them by yourself, so you buy them outsourced. That's just the way it is. You might have someone who is very good at making music. You might want to use that person, but you can't hire a person who is doing sound work or sound design or composing your soundtrack simply because you will not have money to do that. And in fact, if we consider what are the three most important problems in your company during the first 2 years of existence, the first one will be money, the second one will be money, and the third one will also be money. You are always running against the clock that you will run out of your outsourcing contract or your own funding, or you don't have money to do that, or money to go there, and money to market there. That's so huge challenge for your company that it outshines basically every other thing. Because if we consider what we need for a game studio startup, if everything was free, we need a laptop, one developer, and some place to recharge the battery for that laptop. But because we are in a real world, we need also other things. So the money and how to make more of it, how to get everything done, how to pay for the things, bills you accumulate is the largest problem. And everything else is just elbow grease and effort. So this is a more of a detail, but we collected from number of game studios a list of things which they consider important. The black ones are the most important aspects for the company from list of things, and the white one is the least important aspect, meaning that they don't care about this aspect that much. Of course, the human capital, financing, and marketing are the things that most companies found very important. But there's, funnily enough, one company here who doesn't care about marketing. That's because they already have a publishing house contract. They just make the product or prototype. If the publishing house agrees on that, they will do all the marketing work. So basically, they don't have to care about this at all. But if other companies which don't have that, it's one of the most important things for those companies. KSP, which didn't find it that important, was a subsidiary of other software development company. So basically, they had access to marketing via their owner company. So this also means why they aren't that interested in it. But things like human capital, the people who can draw, the people who can do programming work, the people who can sell your product, they are the key assets of your company. They are the only ones which are very difficult to replace. So you have to keep those people in. That's why they also usually are partial owners if you are in a game studio, because it requires you to be a very, very weird person if you walk out from something that you actually partially own simply because you want to do something else for now. But also, yeah, human capital, marketing, and financing. These are the key aspects. Finally, if you want to find a job on these companies or want to go to game development world, of course, I can't say if this is something that the Ubisoft in Toronto finds interesting, but at least Supercell and Rovio were very well agreeing both of these things. So what companies want? What can you expect from these games from the people who you want to hire or want to find job in a game studio? The first aspect is, of course, that actual talent is rare. There's people who have been taught programming, there's people who have been studying graphics and arts and these sort of things. But actually talented people are very rare. And that's why also they are important as a human resource for the startup companies. They are also very important as human resources to the large international game studios. You need to like the games for themselves. The game industry isn't the sort of place where you go do 9 to 5 job and then go home and don't give a piss about the thing when it's a weekend or something like that. You need to have a passion for things because it's so hectic and it's so annoying and sometimes so nerve wracking and stressful industry that you will not survive unless you really want to be there. Also, interestingly, there's both these companies said that they get Unity developers or Unreal Engine developers. They can get those guys as many as they need because that's taught everywhere. But what they actually need are C++ developers who can actually do something with mathematics and physics about the model calculations, about the rendering engine, about the physics engine, about the core optimizations, about the core development work. Because they don't want to do stuff with the standard tools. They are too large company to go behind and use the tools someone else made for them. They need to also push the limit of the tools, and they need people who are actually competent C++ programmers so they can do work on that field. And they have no use for mediocre talent. So if you want to go to work for a game studio, find the thing at which you are very best. You consider that's your best talent and keep on developing that. The mediocre talent, well, there's usually no use for them because 10 people making a graphical user interface design who are mediocre on that job can spend months and they still don't come up with as fine or good solution and as one very talented person comes up within 1 hour because it's just something that you need to have as a talent so that it cuts the grade of the industry. So focus on your best skills. And finally, do several projects, do several themes, do several genres, because that also helps you to understand what the game products actually are, how they are designed, and what are needed in different types of games. Okay, so there's also this one of the last slides, which is development model for startups. So the steps the companies take to from startups. The minimal core team here is something that makes the first demo version. Then there's the business startup, which actually has some product out. The recent startup, which has small portfolio of things, and full business, which actually can already have a product line or franchise or IPR. What sort of things they need, what sort of things they outsource, what sort of things are they expecting from their business. I'm not going to go through this because we are running out of time, but this is a slide you might want to look up from the course Moodle website. And finally, a couple of slides of different things we have been studying from the game development and game startup organizations. These you can find from our university research portal along with these. So these also all discuss things about games from the viewpoint of software engineering or games industry as a subset of software engineering industry. Okay, so ensure that I checked this morning, 20 people have already submitted the work, which is good because the deadline was 4 hours ago. But ensure that if you actually did submit something, check out one more time that everything is accessible. Your game, your original game development document, your game source code, and your game trailer video are accessible. If you messed up something, you can email me if you can change your submission by yourself. But because I'm just forwarding the information you have given to me to your reviewers, ensure that these things are actually accessible and you have send me the correct links, and you have the access rights or view rights to these documents set so that anyone can actually see them. I will email everyone or send a Moodle message when you can take these things offline. But for now, these have to be online, accessible via link, and don't mess this up. So you will get an email assignment, the review form, the links to the games you will need to review, complete them, send them back to me, and you will receive your grade and short summary of your games reviews in email in a couple of weeks, or link to the place where you can find your games reviews. The grades will be online, submitted to the Student Affairs Office during the December, so that they will be counted for studies completed during this year. And yeah, no materials, no grade, no review, no grade, deadline missed, no grade. Check Moodle for details, and keep in mind that everyone here probably made their first game this time, so keep that in mind when you are making the review work. And that's that. We actually, unlike usually, we use the whole time, but this lecture is a bit longer, and of course, there's, today is a good day for you because most of the work is already done. So just wait for an email. It comes to your loot domain for the reviews. Everyone reviews 2 games, do the reviews, and then you will get your summary and grades before the new year. Good. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? If not, then I'll just cut the recording and you are free to